Red River Podcast, episode number 97. We get a chance to talk to Jameson Ketchum. Jameson reached out. He wrote a book. It's pretty much about music, and your life is like a rock journalist and going on tour with some bands and stuff like that. And we're super heavy on the music and stuff. So, man, welcome. Thanks for doing the show.
Yeah, thank you guys. I know we've been trying to make it work for a while, so I'm stoked to finally be doing it.
For sure. I mean, and you stumbled onto us through Mike Henneberger, right?
Yeah. Mike is the man. I still talk to him a couple of times a week, just comparing notes on book stuff. And yeah, that dude is a worker. He's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. So real quick, like I know this is your second book. The first thing I couldn't really figure out what it was, but let's just go to this. So name dropping, seeking creative truth through trendy altruism and punk rock, which is a pretty long title, but definitely reminiscent of the song titles of the bands that you seem to like. So that's pretty funny too.
I didn't think about that. I'm going to start saying that now.
Yeah, because you know what it was like growing up, like we're a little older. So like those bands that you mentioned, I don't really know much of them, but like obviously Taking Back Sunday is a local band. I know the guys and whoever else. Like I feel like that era was like all these like super long titles that had nothing to do with the song.
That is true. You guys are in Long Island, right?
Yeah, yes. Long Island. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, this has a lot to do. The title does have a lot to do with the book. So, what made you want to write this? This is definitely, it seems to be like your perspective, your life, and some interesting topics. So, if just tell me what made you write it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly had always just had this really big goal. Like, what if I could ever write a book? Just being a nerd about writing and about reading in general. And I just thought that's so impossible. That's something you do when you're in your 50s and you have all this extra time. Not something you do in your late 20s or early 30s. But I started writing out some stories from tour that I just thought were funny, and I was just going to share with kind of the people that were there. And after a while, I was like, man, like I kind of can't stop writing these stories. Like, and then I thought, oh, I have these stories from when I have a podcast or when I, spent time as an editor at Substream. Like I started pulling from all these different parts of life, and I thought if I can find a connector that could actually make this a book and not just like a series of blog posts, then I'll do it. And hopefully I've had other people say like, oh, it's almost like an essay collection or like vignettes and stuff, which is totally fine. But the connector being that I don't think I'd really sat down and assessed how impactful music had been to my life. And then hopefully I try to explore too, like how, to broaden that beyond just me and say, man, this is a thing that most of us listen to every day. Even if it's on in the background, it's still there, it's still present. But let's look at it a little deeper and what it actually means to us.
Yeah,
maybe you could tell us a little bit too, but your background, where you came up from, what like brought you into being a music lover, like what was your early exposure?
Yeah, I'm the youngest of three brothers, so a lot of people have this experience where you stole your brother's CDs and tapes and stuff. And
yeah, you're right.
And like all your taste really was dictated by them, at least to start with. So it was a lot of, I remember listening to Dookie, listening to Green Day in like third grade and thinking like, this is the best thing I've ever heard. And of course, as an adult, you're like, I should not have been listening to that. These are very adult themes about mental health and sex and all kinds of things. But in third grade, you're like, yeah, this guy gets me. So stuff like Green Day was huge. I grew up in the church, so definitely a lot of youth group type bands. Stuff like DC Talk or Newsboys, where again, hearing that stuff and just being like, this is the heaviest music I've ever heard. This is, this is just so, it's something just very unexplainable.
Yeah. I just want to cut you off for a second too, because it's interesting. Like another part of your story is like the religious roots of it, and like me and Brian are like complete like Neanderthals. Like the fact that you even said Dookie had adult themes, I'm thinking like, did it really? Like, I don't remember.
For a third grader.
I don't remember yeah, but I mean, that's your perspective for sure. And so growing up, like, I guess like my grandmother, let's say, was like religious, and I'm sure all of us were somewhat like I went to Catholic school for the first 5 years or whatever. I don't know, fifth grade. And to me, like, I just looked at it and I was like, this is just not my thing. So I never really took part of it. But for some reason, it got to you. So like growing up, was there some sort of like, oh, this is just the way it is? Did you ever question it?
I don't think much questioning came about until maybe, I mean, the really hardcore questioning was certainly like into college. I think most people that grew up the same way that I did have a similar trajectory as far as went to youth group and listened to punk bands that were safe and had the poster that was like, hey, if you like Nirvana, you should listen to Skillet. Like we all had a lot of the friends I still have today have a lot of the same stories like that. But I think questioning came even some in junior high and high school. But at the same time, I think the impact that the music had on me at the time, it wasn't about, I don't think I had a sense of this music is connected to God somehow, or it's somehow this magical spiritual thing. It was more of that's what was accepted. That's my friends listened to, but that's what my parents were okay with. And I think a big theme in the book is discovering that, for one, that not all those bands were what they said they were, and they weren't as wholesome. and what they sold us wasn't all true. And then on the flip side of that, that there were bands that didn't carry that message that were way more spiritually impactful to me later on. And it was just cool to think about, like, oh yeah, it's not that cut and dry, you know?
So the two older siblings, I mean, I guess they kind of also falling in line with that, because if they had Dookie, I mean, did your parents approve of something like Dookie, or were they just doing their own thing?
No, so I got Dookie from a friend. My older brothers were, I remember my oldest brother came home with the Shaq Diesel tape, Shaq's first, the rapper. Yeah, and I tried to find it on YouTube the other day. Like, I mean, of course it's there, but I didn't remember the songs as well as I had thought. But I remember, he said "damn" in a couple songs. Like, it was a very tame album.
Yeah.
But like that was enough to like get it put in the closet out of our reach for until the parents were gone, that we could get it down and jam out as much as I do. But
yeah, no, it's.
I think we all had those kind of experiences, stuff. Like I tell the story. I had a Mentors record. And I hid it in my closet. And one day I came home and my mom cleaned my room and the Mentors record was gone, but we never spoke about it. Like, it was too uncomfortable. Like, where's my Mentors record?
It might as well have been gone.
Yeah, that for sure. That record. But DC Talk was something that we always, like, I remember. I know Brian remembers too. It's like yeah, like we went in Striper too, because we were like old, like we grew up, in that 80s like metal world, like, like just at the tail end of it. And Striper was one of those things, I'm always fascinated by people, like, so growing up, like me personally, like I didn't give a fuck about like my parents. I'm like, I don't care. Like there was not that I wanted to disappoint them, but their approval meant shit to me. So I'm always fascinated by the flip side of like, like the compliance, or like, if someone is just like, you either look at your parents as like, in a rebellious way, or like, these are my heroes and stuff. So,
yeah. And I think I was somewhere in the middle. I love that. I'm glad that you guys know stuff like DC Talk and News.
Oh yeah.
From doing a few of these interviews about the book, I've discovered that like once somebody's like, oh, like I know DC Talk or I know Newsboys, you're like, my friend. Like,
yeah. They're like the Led Zeppelin of Christian music for sure.
Yeah.
And
I
was going to say real quick. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit for me. I had no idea. So I was a big Pedro the Lion fan. Are you familiar?
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, and I had no idea their kind of like early beginnings. And I remember going to this show at North 6 in Brooklyn, back when it was North 6. And I just didn't put two and two together. And in between the songs, David, the singer, he answers questions. And I'm sitting there talking to this girl, right? I'm like kind of like flirting with her, kicking it with her and all this other shit. And we're just hanging out watching the show. And then he stops the song, in between songs, and he's like, all right, any questions? And she's like, oh, let me ask a question real quick. And then she's like, where do you find the love of Jesus Christ in your life right now? And I was just like, whoa. I'm like, yo, what do we, it just like blew my mind. And he was like, well, that's kind of like a big personal question. She's like, but if you find me after the show, like, we'll talk about it. And that was the first time where I asked my friend, I was like, are they like, I had no idea. I'm like, I love them, but they and later on I mean, you know the story, right? How he just kind of almost like left the church. Interesting stuff. So, but that's my small interaction. So, but yeah, back to you. So growing up, music was a big deal. And somewhere along the way, did you ever want to play in a band?
Yeah, I really wanted to. I just have no talent whatsoever. And I feel like this is a recurring theme where like I fall in with a group of friends and they all do a thing and I'm like, oh, I'll pick that thing up, like skateboarding, and just never being able to do it or never being able to play guitar. And I'm sure I didn't give it enough of a chance at all.
You could write.
Probably.
You could write.
Well, I think it just came down to like, this would be cool. Like if I could snap my fingers and have this talent, sure. But I don't have the same drive for wanting to learn an instrument or be in a band or be on stage. Like all the background stuff sounded way more cool to me, I think. But I love that Dave Bazan story. I've never been the biggest Pedro fan necessarily, but his whole story and stuff, the way that people have reacted to it and have put him on this pedestal for that type of thing has been fascinating.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's like I just knew, you know, just very little. And then I know the documentary just came out like a year ago, and yeah, just interesting stuff, you know, like a very honest and conflicted, but I had just no idea. I was like, it's hard to find a friend. I thought that record was great. And musically, for when I started writing songs, like that record influenced me, where most of my friends were listening to like hardcore and all this other shit. To me, I found Pedro the Lion, Pavement, like Lemonheads, like all that early 90s, like alt rock shit. So, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just always curious because I feel like there were all these bands, like a large era that I talk about in the book is sort of the golden era of Tooth and Nail, which was Amberlin, MXPX, Under Oath, all that stuff. And I know that those bands weren't overly preachy or anything, so I always wondered, I guess, what the average fan, if an average fan that wasn't coming there because they, you know, heard them at youth group, if they were still pulling some sort of like spiritual message, or if they were getting the same thing out of it, maybe that like church kids were, or if they were even aware, you know.
Yeah.
How important was like the message as far as like did you ever hear a band like you really liked, but like you weren't really feeling what they were talking about, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna leave that alone? Like, did you separate the art from the artist? Like, I know, like for me, like I love Ted Nugent's Stranglehold. I know I don't agree with the word the guy says, but I fuck with Ted Nugent. You know what I mean?
I fuck with that song.
No, and that's been such a big thing lately with all the like, you know, stuff coming out of band. You hear about a band that you love, and there's some, you know, oh, this guy used to, you know, hit on 14-year-olds, and you're like, oh man, like you have to like battle that yourself. Obviously you're not like, well, I can excuse it because he's a great songwriter. But yeah, that art versus artist thing is really tough. I don't think that I'm thankful that I don't feel like I ever had too much of a, okay, I'm going to go see this band because they're Christian, because they talk about this. Oh no, I just saw the guy smoking a cigarette out back, I'm done with them. Because I think I just really, really had a disdain for the fans that I knew and the friends that I had that would do that kind of thing. I mean,
yeah, go ahead. No, yeah, that's interesting.
One of the first publications I worked at, the editor was sort of that way. It was like, hey, we got this interview coming out with this band. Great. Okay, we're all fans. And then a day or two later, it'd be like, you know, I read this other interview with him where he was, you know, pretty against calling himself a Christian band. And then he talked about his divorce, and he talked about, you know, getting into alcohol, like just stuff that's like, yeah, like, because life is hard, man. Like,
life is hard. Yeah.
They're humans too.
Decide, like, well, they're not in our club anymore, feature them. Like, I just hated that. It's too murky anyway.
No, it's the same thing. Like, even like, you know, straight edge stuff, you know, like any band that, you know, and that's the one thing about taking a stance on certain things. Like, it's like, as you evolve and grow as a person, like sometimes you make mistakes and stuff like that. But it's just, for me, like I've been given 100 chances, you know? So it's like, I don't know, whoever I was at 20 isn't who I was at 30, who isn't, you know, what I was at 40, as far as like mistakes. So anytime, you know, someone does some fucked up shit, like I don't care. I mean, shit, me and him listen to Gigi Allen, you know, and he's fucking,
you know, before the grace of God go I, right? That's
yeah,
that's what they say.
Yeah. So to me, like, you could do whatever you want, but like, yeah, it's funny that I didn't even think of that perspective. Like, with these bands growing up, that like a cigarette is enough to like be like, all right, we can't, fuck with you. So, yeah. So it takes a nation for sure. So like the music scene, like I had this conversation with a video director just recently, where if you don't play in a band, there's, you write about it, or you film a video, or like, you create a zine, you know what I'm saying? Like there's so many parts to like this music scene, and somewhere along the way you just like carve out like what was like your earliest like writing assignment, or like the time that you knew that this is what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I thought when I was kind of going back through journals and putting stories in the book. I don't know how this one got left out, so I didn't put it in the book, and I haven't talked about it yet. But it's the first time I interviewed someone like of notoriety was somebody from Bleeding Through, and I talk about this in the book. I was at an internship at To Write Love on Our Arms at the time, a nonprofit organization down in Florida, and I'd never interviewed anyone over the phone. I was like, how do you record this? Like, this is 2007, 2008. So I had no way to record it. I was just like, but I said yes. And I definitely got there with like, not like fake credentials, but I was like, my first interview should not be somebody from Bleeding Through. Probably not. Right. I called him. I started asking questions, and I typed as he talked.
Oh, wow. Holy shit.
Yeah, it was real dumb. It was real dumb to do, but I just had no other way to do it. And it was from like this. It was for like an online zine and stuff. But I was like, I remember getting done, and I did fine. Like I kind of like caught up with him enough to make it work. But I was like, that was really thrilling. And there's so many bands, and I wasn't a big Bleeding Through fan, but I was like, there's so many bands that I'm at this point so obsessed with, and would pay so much money to sit down with and ask whatever I want. And then basically realizing, oh, there's a profession that allows that. And if I can start with bands either that I'm not a fan of, or local bands or whatever, and just climb the ladder, then great. Like then I can be, hopefully one day I'll be sitting in front of Amberlin or MXPX, and that all happened.
Yeah.
I think it was just figuring out, I have this really big obsession with music. I have no way in as far as talent of playing something or singing. What do I enjoy over here that I can possibly marry to my obsession with music? And that became a thing, I think, throughout my career so far, that I always tried to encourage people about. Like I had a close friend who was a hairdresser, and she's like, so this is what I do. Like I'm a hairdresser by profession, but I also go to shows all the time, and I love like that whole scene and atmosphere of bands and all that. Like, but what I do is so far apart. And it's like, there's almost always a way, like, and then she's giving, haircuts to bands and stuff. Like
that's it. Yeah.
To find the weird thing that you do over here, and try to wedge it into your obsession. So
well, because we're so like, all three of us for sure, we're so driven by music to this day. Like I'm 43, and it's like one of those things where it's like, it was always a big deal to me. If I'm in the car, like that meme, it's like I need a playlist to go to, like today I got to go food shopping. I'm going to have these headphones on, listening to either a podcast about music or a playlist, because it's just, everything about it is just, a soundtrack. So when you're so passionate about something, you just want to be involved. And I feel like that's what you did. You found a way. Did you ever go see a show and review it?
Yeah, I didn't love doing that. I didn't love reviewing.
It's tough, right?
It's so hard,
right? Like if you don't, because you don't want to be like, oh yeah, this band kind of sucked. Like you can't, because if that's the case, you're gonna, like, eventually people are gonna be like, I fucking hate this guy.
Yeah, I've done hundreds of album reviews, and I used to really enjoy it, and I'll still do them from time to time. But I remember hitting this brick wall of just like, who am I? Who am I to say this is like, bad, or it's okay, or like when you've been around bands and what they do in the studio and how much work goes into that, to have this little writer in his basement be like, it wasn't that great. Like I was like, I don't want to be that guy.
No, it's true. Even like movie reviews, like all this other stuff. Like I know, like even on Facebook, like if I knock something, it might derail 3 people from watching it. So I'm like super careful, because I'm like, all right, it's not for me. Maybe you'll like it.
Exactly. Like this is why it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
So it's always for me, because you might love it.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Nickelback is like a punchline, but go to their shows. I guarantee you they're an amazing live band, and I guarantee you there's at least 10,000 people there that are very happy to be there. So it's like,
Yeah.
who am I?
And we all know a song. We all know at least one Nickelback song. I mean, can't sing
Speak for yourself.
Also, I probably know at least 4 or 5.
No, I do.
Starting point.
Yeah. But and
Yeah.
even album reviews. So like it's do you so the assignment, right? Like whatever you were writing for, like let's say it's something a record that you don't like particularly like, but you know it's good. Like how do you dance around that in an honest and fair way?
Yeah, I think what I ended up doing a lot was, especially if it was a band I wasn't super familiar with, not only would I go back and listen to as much of their other stuff as I could, but I think the angle I would end up taking is how does it differ or how is it similar to what you just heard from the last record or the last two. It would be I think I just found it easier to start being like, okay, Thrice just went in this totally different direction. Here's what it sounds like. Here's where you might be surprised. And yeah, kind of in a more eloquent way, saying like, here's why you might not like it if you were already, into them because of this or that.
Yeah, now that's a band that Thrice took some turns. That's a band I know. I really like that band. So they started off, very hooky, but they had like these Iron Maiden like harmony guitars, and then Artists in the Ambulance came out, and it kind of like shook everything. It was like, okay, this is like our peak, and then they come out with like Vishu probably afterwards, if I remember correctly.
Right.
And that's a band that just continued to evolve, and I think now that they're definitely like it's amazing. Like now they just do whatever they want and stuff. So
I haven't heard too much of their new stuff, but I'm on like a Thrice fan page on Facebook, and it's getting a lot of crap. Their new stuff saying like, oh, they're just trying to be Radiohead, and so I got to catch up. But you're right. They're the band to cite of just like sharp right turn. Never thought of that coming. And I don't know. Like I admire the bands though that are kind of just like, yeah. I mean, we might have lost some people on that one, but what you want us to keep making the Artist in the Ambulance over and over? Like we can't do that.
It's one of those things where it's like me coming as a songwriter, you always want to try different things, but when from a fan perspective, when I go see Thrice or like Alkaline Trio, I mean bad examples because I like their newer stuff too, but like if I go see like Radiohead, perfect, you mentioned them, so I don't want to hear anything beyond Kid A, but as a musician, you're like, oh, but I just wrote this record, and I want everyone to hear these new songs. So it's like that push and pull is real.
Yeah, I think this is in the book, but I was doing an event with To Write Love in Florida, and Dustin Kenster was there doing a solo show, and the Alchemy Index had just come out.
Yep.
Not too long before. Yeah, and I love those. I was always like a average Thrice fan, but I was like, man, those are so great. But what a weird turn, and I made this big thing to him about like, I just think it's so cool. You're kind of doing whatever you want. And I feel like these songs are so great, and how cool that your fans are so loyal. They stick with you through these changes. And he laughed and he's like, they didn't stick with us.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. But I thought, oh man, yeah, like this is your career. You do have to be smart about what you give your audience. But the fact that he's like, people didn't like it. And that's fine.
Yeah, for sure. So also in the book, you mentioned, basically Fall Star, right? That was the band that you went on tour with. So where are they from? Idaho, was it?
Portland.
Okay, so how did you link up with them, and why did you decide to go on tour? Was it like just like a writing thing, or just like a hanging out thing?
A little bit of both. I had known a few of the members. Knew a few of the members in different ways, and didn't realize they were in a band. Didn't realize they were all connected. Their singer Chris, I went to community college with him, and we both worked at the same mall. So we weren't even friends. It was more just I'd see him in class, and I was like, "Oh, you work at this store, right?" And I'd see him at the mall and do the same thing. And I would eavesdrop on him and his friends talking about what shows they went to the weekend before, and I was like, "Ooh, I was at that show. We should be friends." And so the tour thing was more of, they invited me on. I helped connect them with this clothing line that put them on just like a 2-week tour down, like we're from Portland, Oregon, so down to Texas and back. And so they invited me on that. And I remember thinking like, how cool that I'll get to go on tour one time. Like that's such a feather in my cap to be able to say I did this thing. Never thinking beyond 2 weeks that I'll do it once, and what a cool story to have. And as soon as we got home, every single guy, normally, you'd get home from something like that and you'd be like, all right, I don't want to see your face for a month, talk to you later. We were all hanging out again like the next day and just trying to figure out when can we do this again. So, and I would write from the road. I was the editor of a national magazine while touring. That wasn't ideal because I was trying to write articles in the van. Every stop, I just run to a Starbucks and try to turn something in. And
that's interesting. What magazine was that?
That was for Substream magazine.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. And so, what kind of articles were you writing? Like handing in, basically, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, getting that job became. That was my dream job at the time, because I got to pick all my writers. I was managing about 20 to 25 writers at a time. I was choosing pretty much all the content. I'd say 99% of the content for each issue. So I was able to, selfishly be like, well, I've always wanted to talk to this band. Now I have this platform. I just got to wait for them to put a new record out, so I have a reason to even ask, to talk to them. But it was, my first cover was For Today, which I talk about a bit in the book. And then bands like Tonight Alive, Let Live. The Substream was really focused on who's the next thing, and who's maybe not even the next thing, but who's someone that's working and hustling really hard behind the scenes that we hope is going to blow up even in a year or so. Like they put 21 Pilots, when I was there, we had 21 Pilots on the cover, far before AP, far before they were everywhere.
Huge band now.
Yeah, honestly, too early, probably looking back, but it was we were just so proud to be like, all right, we're noticing bands that are hopefully by this time next year are going to be everywhere, and trying to make those predictions was super fun.
Is there a band that you really loved that you guys covered that just it didn't, they broke up, it didn't work out for them, you wanted a little bit more for them?
Oh yeah, that's tough. I mean, not to say that everything we predicted came true at all.
No, but if there was a band that you heard and you're like, man, this band should be the biggest band on the planet.
Yeah, there was a band that I kept seeing open for bands like Say Anything. They were called Pistolita. I was just listening to them yesterday. Even they should have gotten a much bigger shot at things. But for the most part, our Substream was based out of Ohio, and Ohio at the time was just exploding. 21 Pilots being from Columbus, I believe, and then we were trying to get MGK back in 2013. Right when he signed to Bad Boy and stuff. So. Yeah. The owner of Substream was in Ohio. It's like he just had his finger on the pulse of all these bands that ended up just being massive. So I was in Portland like, well, we got this hardcore band I want to talk about. And so I didn't feel like I had as much local flavor to get into as he did.
Yeah, it's interesting too, like Machine Gun Kelly, MGK, whatever. What do you think of his departure from hip hop to like make pop punk records?
It's super interesting. I see so many people angry about it, and I guess I don't have like that much of a vested interest to like feel really passionate about it.
Yeah. Same.
There's times where I see him on stuff, and I just think, I don't know if he should be as big as he is, and I don't find him particularly charismatic or interesting. I've spent about 30 seconds with him. That's all I can, that's all I can base it on. But as far as, I don't know, the pop punk stuff he does isn't bad by any means. I mean,
doesn't John Feldman? I feel like John Feldman like co-wrote that record with him and probably wrote it for him.
He might have. I mean, I know Travis Barker was heavily involved with him too. So I think he's certainly got like a lot of good people around him for that genre. But people just seem to be pissed that he, I don't know, took such a turn, or is like, hey, you can't just switch genres. Like, I don't know why people.
Yeah. I mean, you can, if you could.
He played Tommy Lee, and then that's what changed. That's what.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because like we're like
he was good too.
He was great. We're older guys. We know Motley Crue, and he did for people like me and Brian that grew up watching Tommy Lee's mannerisms. Right. I'm like, this motherfucker like got his shit. Like he got his shit down, So he's probably thinking like,
I love that movie.
I could do this.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah. The Dirt was just a pretty interesting movie for sure. I wish all of it was true, but I mean the timeline's all fucked up, but it was still entertaining at the end of the day. And for a guy like Machine Gun Kelly to go from a hip hop career to like a rock,
battling Eminem too, like right before that, like really going all in.
I got
that.
super into that feud for sure. That was
me too. Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, and people, I mean, it's just so funny because people, you know, asking what side you'd fall on and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, you know, I don't know these people. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, I'm 35, and so I definitely had a little bit more of that old man, like you can't do this to Eminem. Like Eminem's the greatest.
Yeah.
And so it does feel a little bit like I've been watching a ton of basketball documentaries too, and I was like, it's the same thing where people are like, well, LeBron and Jordan. I'm like, you can't say that. Like Jordan is all time.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
More and more realizing like, oh, I'm old, and it's you have your Jordan and you have your LeBron. Like it's same with Eminem and stuff like that. But.
Yeah, you do for sure, and it's like, but objectively, I listened to them both, and I think Machine Gun Kelly really put out some, you know, like I think I heard 1 or 2 diss records that he gave for M, and I thought they were very good, like considering, you know, the guy's had a career and he did, you know, like Bad Boy was a big deal, but yeah, it's funny just to see him do this like pop punk thing, which I don't know anything about, so to me it's like do whatever you want.
Yeah, I really try, like, because I think we're so quick to say we hate something.
We're not here. Like we don't hate anything. To me, I'm like, if you maybe Brian does, but like to me, I'm just thinking like, you know, if you got a fan base and you put shit out and people fuck with you, by all means, it's not my thing, but do your thing.
Well, so MGK was on like SNL, and that video was everywhere. I can't even think of the name of the song, but his first main really catchy single. And I found myself being like, oh yeah, I don't really like that he's doing this, and being exactly what we're talking about, and then stopping and being like, I need to at least be able to say I listened to the whole record. Like if I listen to it and I don't like it,
you have to.
Fair, but I was like, as of right now, I've heard one song a few times and I'm kind of annoyed with it. Yeah, I got to at least give it a fair shot.
You have to, because people will be like, oh, I hate it, and it's like, well, what's your least favorite song? And it's like, I didn't even listen to it. It's like, but yeah, it's like you could say you're indifferent towards it. There's no need for you to listen to it. So, but going to the book, man, I always find it fascinating when someone writes a book, like the undertaking part of it. Like, how do you, like, are there situations that maybe you recall differently and you're wondering if they really happened the way they did? You know, like, what is that exercise like in your mind?
I hope that it like really I hope it was like old man exercises where instead of doing crossword puzzles, like I did this, and I hope that strengthens some memory muscle in there. Thankfully, I journaled a lot through it, and then I still know a lot of the people, you know, from a lot of the stories. I tend to trust my memory pretty good. I also know that the people that were there have way worse memories than I do. So if I try to clarify something, they might be like, I don't remember any of that. Like, write whatever you want, because I don't remember that happening at all.
You didn't microdose?
Right. That's kind of what it came down to, I think. No, I remember like kind of wrapping up the book and being like, my worst fear being like somebody contacting me that I haven't seen in a while that is in one of the stories and being like, dude, not cool.
That's what I was going to ask you, if you had to be like real selective, like, man, I would love to write about this particular thing, but I don't think I should put this in here.
I thankfully I only ended up taking one story out of the final product. And partially, I mean, I feel like there's only a few slightly negative stories, and that's where I chose not to quote name drop anyone, because it's just not that kind of book. But I think I also wanted to include some things where things just didn't turn out the best, or even to embarrass myself and be like, yeah, when I was younger and I was first starting, here's something embarrassing and stupid I did with this band or said to this band. So I wanted to include like stuff that I didn't want the whole book to just make it sound like I'm only going to tell all the positive stories about me and only make me look.
No, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's got to be compelling on that level for sure. So being that we're from Long Island, and shout out to my buddy Mark, you had some interactions with Taking Back Sunday. What were those?
Oh man, that's talk about a band where like someone showed them to me and I didn't like them at the beginning at first, and then the biggest comeback in terms of one of my all-time favorite bands. I love every song on every album. It makes me mad when someone says like, oh, I remember them, or where have they been? I'm like, they've been consistently putting out great music. That's what they've been doing. So I talk a bit about New Jersey in the book, but Long Island, same thing, where I was so jealous of what was coming out of there in my like high school and college days, where I was just like, man, like if you were just a local kid over there, it sounds like you could have just gone to the greatest shows every weekend. You would have been seen Brand New and Bayside and Taking Back Sunday and the movie life. Like, what a magical place you guys are from. I've heard bad things too, but
what would be your favorite Taking Back Sunday album?
Oh man, it changes a lot, but a lot of times, I mean, people really don't like New Again, and that's way up there for me.
Oh, okay.
The first time I got to do a physical in-person sit down with Adam and John. I think I asked them about that, or I asked Adam, and he's like, well, some of it was like, you know, just what was happening in the band at the time, and then just it, you know, sonically didn't come out the way we wanted, and I felt like so compelled to be like, it's so good though. Like I think like it sucks that you don't like it, and I get it, and you're the creator, but I think a lot of people love it, and hopefully you can like take some solace in that. Yeah. So to your original question, they were a band that were probably among 2 or 3 others that I was like, if I can ever reach that level. And it's not that Taking Back Sunday's U2 or something, they're not unattainable, but it was the importance of them to me. If I can ever be sitting down with them, that'd be a huge achievement.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, for, you know, to some people they're U2, you know, like yeah. To some people, some kids are like, fuck U2.
Yeah.
Do you still go out on the road and like right on the road? Is that something you don't do anymore, or did you miss it?
Yeah, I've really missed doing it. I probably haven't. I mean, besides the pandemic, I haven't done a tour probably in 5 or 6 years or so, even like a short run.
Mm-hmm.
Fallstar has one coming up. I mean, I'm not sure what's going to happen with it now, and they invited me on that. And the last 4 or 5 years, if I would get invited on something, I just thought, man, like try to think back when you were in your early 20s and you would just jump at this chance versus being in your early 30s and being like, that sounds awful. Like I can't sleep on the concrete underneath a van at Walmart anymore. Like,
yeah, that ain't happening.
That's really gonna make me mad. That first night, I'm gonna be like, "This was a really bad decision."
I'm going to a hotel.
There's something when you're in your in your 20s, you're with all your friends. It's an adventure, like it's
sure.
not going to be plush by any means. But I think when you're older and you realize, like, oh, that I've had those memories, I've had those experiences, I can lock those away. Mm-hmm. I don't know if at 35, I need any more of that. At the same time, if I had all the freedom to do it,
you need a place to sleep with back support.
Yeah. So as far as like influences go, writers and stuff, do you have like any like authors that you're a big fan of that influence you in any way?
Yeah. As far as maybe more on like the religious side of things, Rob Bell is a huge one. I talk about him a ton in the book. He's written a bunch of stuff, but the book that he was kind of became more mainstream famous for was called Love Wins, which was Rob's a former pastor and stuff, but he basically presented like, I don't know if there is a heaven and hell. Like, I don't know if it's as black and white as what we talk about in church and what it takes to get there or not get there and stuff. So that was a huge controversy and a big deal. But he's a guy like other writers where I feel like he presents a thing that's like, hey, remember how, like think about how we've thought the same thing the same way about this same topic your whole life. What if we take one step to the right and look at it from this angle? And it's just like blows my mind every time.
Do progressive thinking people like that often, they probably get like hammered in that community, right?
Big time. I don't know if it's as bad as it used to be. I think it's changing a lot. Are you guys familiar with like Tammy Faye Baker?
Yeah.
Their son Jay. Yeah, great dude. And so I love talking to him about this stuff because he grew up with like the most intense version of that, televangelist, and all that stuff. And so I love talking to him about like where the church was, where it's gone, like that he's now covered in tattoos. And yeah, he's a guy that if he was, walked in their church back then, maybe would have had a rough time. So yeah, I hope that that's changing a lot. I don't know that people get as hammered about it. It's still certainly there. It's not a circle I feel like I'm in as much. So
okay, yeah. Just curious. Yeah, like we like to always ask about influences and stuff like that on the show. like, you know, whenever musicians like listen back to their record, this is always like a thought in my head. Like you put out a book. Obviously you can't like read the whole thing in 2 seconds and be like, oh, you know, like I really hate chapter 2, but like what is like the self-criticism for a writer like you know, like what's that angle like?
Oh man, yeah. And this book took about like a little over 2 years rereading it and correcting stuff. And that's what I imagine. Yeah, it's like with a record too, but you're going over it and over it, and you're second guessing stuff the whole time. You're just like, I don't know. I don't want anyone to see this. Maybe I shouldn't even put it out at all.
Yeah, yeah.
It's embarrassing. So self-criticism wise, I mean, there's certainly stuff that's like, man, like I said earlier, do I just sound like I've never made a mistake ever? Like, am I only presenting stories where I come out looking good?
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've really tried to push to like, show stuff where I said or did something stupid. I'm sure there's more that I have left out and blocked out of my mind completely anyway. But yeah, the self-criticism is hard. I mean,
with anything, like when you make art, it's just, or like, you know,
something personal.
Yeah, it's just something like you I always you mentioned something earlier where you're like, who am I? And through life, that's something that I always ask myself whenever I feel a certain way. I'm always like, well, who the fuck am I? Like, you know, and that's what prevents me from like, you know, the high horse look down. I'm thinking like, I'd say something, but who the fuck am I?
Yeah, and honestly, like I could tell you on every single story in the book, I could go back to being in my body and in my brain at the time and thinking like I don't deserve to be here, or like I'm a nuisance by being here. A friend of mine was like, so you now have all these stories collected in this one volume, in this one book. Like I don't know how you can look at this and still think like you didn't do anything, or that you didn't deserve, like this stuff wouldn't have happened if you weren't good at your job, or you didn't, know the right people or whatever. So it's so easy to just explain away of like, yeah, but anyone could do that. Or like, anyone could meet this band and talk about this. Like anyone could do it. And in some ways you're like, yeah, you're right, but you did it. You followed through.
I totally relate to that because whenever we talk to someone that, like a friend is, loves or whoever, they're like, oh my God, congratulations. I was like, I mean, I have a mic and Wi-Fi. Like, what? Right. I didn't do anything. I didn't just. Yeah. All I did was just message someone. They're like, "Yeah, well, I'll do your stupid show," or like, or like a show. Like, if my band gets offered like a big show, like they're like, "Oh my God, that's so cool." I'm like, kind of, but not really. Like no one gives a shit. Like they just asked us to play.
Oh, and because you want to say like for every one of those guests that said yes, there's 10 that I wanted that said no. So there's always a way to justify it to make
yeah. And I think it just, it's nice to be grounded in certain things. It's just how we grew up, like I get a test from me and Brian for sure. It's like, I grew up with friends that just, man, they are never going to compliment you. And that's how I grew up. And I like it. It's like, cool. It's like
forever breaking balls.
Yeah. It's like, isn't this cool? They're like, yeah, whatever. But I know that, they it's all love at the end and shit. So, just last question on the book, or about books, really. Now that this is under your belt, is there something that you're eyeing for a next project as far as like writing?
Frozen.
Yeah, let me just message him.
Looks like he's frozen in deep thought. You really laid it out on that question, bro. Devastating.
Okay, all right. You're back. You're back. Go ahead.
I heard you asked if there's something in mind for the next book.
Yes.
Yeah, like is there something that basically that that you, even if you have nothing planned, is there something that you're looking forward to writing about?
Yeah, so since this book took about 2 years to come out and I was editing and it was mostly done, I started writing the next thing, which is just a fictional comedy. So it's like nothing related to what I've done before. I have like a bit of a loose goal of like, can I write one book in all my favorite genres? Just like pick, say like comedy, horror, thriller, nonfiction. And whether I'm just putting that out myself or being published like this time, I thought that would just be a really fun experiment, however, huge undertaking as well. So since there has also been some stories that I left out of this one and that have happened since the book wrapped, and if I continue to be a podcaster and interviewer, maybe I can gather more. The last year and a half has felt like a complete timeout where I just have no stories.
Yeah.
Or very, I'm doing for my podcast, I'm still doing, interviews and stuff, but I feel like that's less likely to produce something than, you know, going down to the venue and sitting in a gross green room and having a conversation. So I hope so. I hope I can do something else music related.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, listen, if you're writing a fucking comedy, that's a big deal. So I asked you to compile 2 lists for us. You know, the live show aspect of the book and your life and our lives. I thought it'd be interesting if you just named your, you know, 5 live performances that you saw that just kind of blew you away.
Yeah, it was hard to come up with just 5, I think. A lot of times it was the first time I saw a band that I had just been obsessed with. Jimmy Eat World certainly being one of them. Just every time, I mean, if nothing else, they sound perfect. I mean, you could put headphones on me and I think it's the same thing. They're immaculate.
Are you a Clarity guy or a Bleed American?
I do love Clarity, but Bleed American was, the first, like, okay, this is incredible. That's one of the first albums where I realized that a band could put out an album where every song is good. That seemed like a foreign concept.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm a Static Prevails guy.
Oh, even further back. Do you still like did you like Futures?
Yeah. So my 2 favorites are, listen, I like the first 4, but funny enough, out of the first 4, Bleed American is my least favorite. But I love Futures. I love Clarity. I mean, shit, we did a Halloween Jimmy Eat World set, so that's how I fuck with them. And you know, we threw Big Casino. Like I'm a big fan of the whole catalog, but like there's something super special about the first 4. So
I haven't been as on board the last probably 2 albums or so. The last one that I really, really loved and spent a lot of time with was Invented. I think that was like a bit of a return to like Futures and the American era.
Yeah, I agree. I like Damages too.
Yeah. Oh, man, I'm gonna go listen to that after.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, okay. So Jimmy Eat World.
Okay. Yeah, Jimmy Eat World. Circa Survive would be another one. Same thing. Well, I was never even a giant Circa fan. Like I kind of knew the hits and I knew a handful of songs. And Anthony Green is just like born to do what he does. Just an incredible showman, and his voice is so insane. So, and it's been every time that I've seen them where it's just something kind of just alien about that guy. I talk about him a lot. He has a whole chapter in the book too, because he's just such a unique dude to talk to.
Super talented, great singer.
Yeah. Thursday as well.
Yeah.
Getting closer to Long Island. Same thing with Thursday, where I remember seeing a thing where they said that when Thursday started, they called their singer Jeff Rickley. His nickname was Tone Jeff. And
that's funny.
I just remember, I remember hearing them for the first time and seeing them live where I was like, yeah, this guy isn't necessarily a great singer at all. I guess I don't care about that. Apparently I don't care about what sounds really good.
Well, the record Full Collapse was like a game changer. So that was like an Artist in the Ambulance thing. That was like a defining of like of a time for sure. And funny enough that you mentioned that, like me and him had the same vocal teacher, which I thought was funny as well.
Oh no.
Melissa Cross.
Yeah.
But
boy, and Melissa Cross is amazing.
She's amazing. And but I remember when I saw them live at a festival, it wasn't the same because when you listen to Full Collapse, there's so many backing vocals, but regardless, a really great live band. And that record in particular was just like a Mount Rushmore type record for that genre, for sure.
Yeah. I got a friend of mine, I remember in high school, burned me Full Collapse and Artist in the Ambulance on the same day.
Wow.
And I went home and put on Full Collapse first, and I was so obsessed with it. I forgot about Artist. I didn't listen to that for another like maybe 10 years or something.
Wow.
Yeah, because it wasn't even like, obviously this Thrice band is gonna suck. I just completely forgot about it.
Yeah.
Oh man, there is so many. I'm like looking around my room at my flags and vinyl and stuff.
You're not gonna mention Dashboard, Swiss Army Romance?
I know. I have, you can't see it, behind my laptop, I have a huge Dashboard flag, actually. I do, I certainly, I am a huge Chris Graba fan and everything he does. I will say, how about this? I will say I saw him perform with Further Seems Forever, which by the time I got onto them, he had already moved on back in the early 2000s. But they put out a record in 2014 where he came back and did a record with them and did a short tour. And I flew down to LA to see it because I just remember thinking like, I'm never gonna get this chance again. And that was way up there to see a dude that we'd all come to know as like the mellow, stand in one place with an acoustic guitar, go back to kind of like his more like rock emo roots and really command the stage and not have a guitar and run around. And yeah, I was like, this guy can kind of do anything. And then number 5, it's more that I don't want to leave a band out, but easy pick would be the Chariot. Have you guys ever seen them?
I know the name, but I don't know.
Yeah, the Chariot, and then a band like Let Live, which is now most people would say the Fever 333 is his new band. But the Chariot was just, I mean, for anyone listening, like look up their video for a song called The City, and it's just a compilation of live stuff. I had never seen a band actually act like that on stage. I mean, setting stuff on fire and running across the crowd like on top of kids' heads and never losing energy. It wasn't just like, man, those first 3 songs, were great, and then they really mellowed out. It was a completely, not only just like complete chaos, but I never saw a fight. I never saw like anything ugly happen. It was just like such a like joyful party around total chaos. It wasn't like total violence. But it wasn't. It was like all smiles. So I don't know how they cultivated that type of show, but never seen anyone else do that.
Yeah, that's the 5 right there. And the last thing that I asked you was just if you name 5 albums through your life, being that music is such a big part of your life. I just thought it would be interesting to ask you those 2 questions: the live performances as well as the 5 albums. So if you give me 5 albums that you have just stuck with you through your life, we all want to hear.
Yeah. So definitely Dashboard, Places You've Come to Fear the Most. I got that the same day as Save the Day, Stay What You Are. And I always say that before I got those 2 albums, that everything on my playlist was Korn and DMX and Linkin Park, which no offense to them, but I mean, talk about a right turn than just going into like emo heartbreak music. So both those 2, yeah, were huge. MXPX, Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo. That's one that pretty much any Christian youth group kid will name, as this was the first time that I could listen to something that was fast, and the guys all had tattoos, and it was cool. It was like safe, That was a big one. Thursday, Full Collapse. I genuinely remember thinking, because this was in high school, and I was like trying to write lyrics and write poetry like all high school kids do, and hearing and reading Jeff Rickley's lyrics and being like, I shouldn't even try. This guy
he was good,
coolest stuff I've ever heard. I will never write like him, and then I probably tried to rip him off for the next year or so. I'm looking at my. Gosh, I probably also Tell All Your Friends.
Tell all your friends.
I would love to hear maybe kind of what the splash that album made, where you guys grew up and stuff, but that. The same thing as Thursday, where it was just the lyrics were incredible. They were so clever, like Adam and John's back and forth on stuff like "Cute Was What We Aim For." I never heard anything like that. And then seeing what they looked like, and kind of, I feel like there were other bands that dressed like them and stuff for sure, but it was the first one that I saw. Like the way that Adam dressed, I thought was so cool, and his haircut was so cool. And maybe the first band where I thought. I was then influenced by more than just like the music. It was even like the style. Like it was becoming more than just a song. And I ended up like having friends that dressed that way and listening to those bands. And I was like, cool, like this is where I want to be. Like this is the club that I think is so cool I want to be in. And that was because of TBS.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, listen, these are the things that influence you growing up. And that's great. We all have that. So before I let you go, once again, the name of the book is Name Dropping. That's like what everyone calls it for short and stuff, man. But it's like, the long title. Go ahead, say the long title.
Seeking Creative Truth Through Trendy Altruism and Punk Rock.
And you mentioned the word emo a few times. So my last question, being that we're old and we remember Rites of Spring, and maybe that was like the only emo thing we remember. What is emo? Like, what does it mean to you? Like, is it just a word that you say, like we say grunge?
Right. I feel like there's just such a huge debate about it, because I still get uppity when I see people talk about My Chemical Romance being emo, and not that they're not. I think maybe the word just evolved, but I always feel like that grandpa that wants to step in and be like, no, 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 like it's Dashboard, it saves the day, it's Goodwill T-shirts. It's like, if someone showed me My Chemical Romance when I was 15, I would have said like, oh, this is like AFI, this is like goth rock, whatever. So I think it's just been a word that's evolved so much. It's been a really negative word for a lot of years, and I think now, just that we're so obsessed with nostalgia, I think it's an okay word again. But to me, like, Dashboard's always been known as like the king of emo. So I feel like that's, by definition, it's that type of music. It's that mellow heartbreak. Yeah, it's not. I hated when it became like associated with like self-injury and depression and stuff. Like I get it, but
Right.
yeah, I wasn't depressed listening to the Dashboard. It was just like, oh man, yeah, like I was 15 and thinking like, yeah, and the next couple of years will be full of heartbreak probably, and I'll have some great songs to listen to when that happens. And I'm happy about it. I'm excited for that part of life versus I'm just depressed and I wear eyeliner, and that's all fine. I thought it was weird that emo became associated with that, I guess.
Yeah, no. I mean, like I said,
That was the Cure for me.
Yeah, I mentioned the Cure. Like we mentioned the Cure, and like Rites of Spring from like mid '80s. So I guess it's just something that just evolved, and I was just curious on your take on it. So, but yo, man, Jameson,
Yeah.
glad
you.
Glad we could finally get this in, and good luck with your book. And I don't know, anytime you want to come back, just hit me up.
Oh man, I would love to. If we're off too, I got another Long Island question for you if you got a minute.
Yeah, I mean, we could be off right now.